Step into the dense forests of the Ohio River Valley, where survival was a daily struggle and every shadow concealed danger. Today, we explore the story of Lewis Wetzel, a man revered by settlers, feared by Native Americans, and remembered as both a protector and a destroyer. His life is more than a tale of vengeance. It encourages us to consider the cost of living in fear, the complexities of war, and the lessons that history teaches us. Wetzel's story reflects a tumultuous era in which two cultures were at war in the late 1700s. After the American Revolution, the frontier became a battleground as settlers moved west to claim land while Native American tribes fiercely defended their homes. The story of Lewis Wetzel is a window into this turbulent time, where the larger forces of conflict and survival shaped individual lives. As we walk alongside Wetzel in the wild frontier, I invite you to imagine yourself in his shoes, and those of his adversaries. What would you have done? Let's dive in. The late 18th century was a time of relentless conflict. In the contested lands of the Ohio River Valley, settlers clashed with Native Americans in a brutal struggle for survival and control. The Proclamation Line of 1763, meant to curb westward expansion, had long been ignored, and treaties like the Treaty of Fort Stanwix, 1768, only escalated tensions as settlers claimed more and more land. For the native tribes, this was not merely a loss of territory, but a dire threat to their survival, which led to raids on white settlements and acts of retaliation. Here, Lewis Wetzel earned his infamous nickname, Death Wind, for his swift and deadly attacks. To settlers, he was a symbol of protection against Native American raids. To the tribes, he was a harbinger of death. But Wetzel's story is not simply one of heroism or villainy. It is a profound human story of trauma caused by violence and survival, in a world where the harsh realities of the frontier blurred moral boundaries. Early life in a land of conflict. Imagine growing up in a place where every shadow might hide an enemy. Lewis Wetzel was born in 1763 in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. His father, a German immigrant and former indentured servant, had escaped the crushing poverty of Europe, only to find himself battling the unforgiving wilderness of the Ohio River Valley. The Wetzels were among the first families to settle west of the Appalachian Mountains, and they were no strangers to hardship. Lewis was the fourth of 7 children in a family that exemplified the rugged determination of frontier life. By 1770, his family had moved to Wheeling Creek in present-day West Virginia. This region was a volatile borderland where settlers and native tribes fought bitterly over land and resources. For the settlers, the frontier represented both a land of opportunity and immense danger. They worked tirelessly to clear land for farming, build homes, and establish communities, often without sufficient protection. Every trip to gather water or hunt could turn deadly. Children were taught to fire a musket as soon as they were strong enough to lift one. The Wetzel family exemplified this rugged lifestyle, with their days filled with hard labor and constant vigilance. Lewis's father, John Wetzel, taught his children the skills they would need to survive: how to track, shoot, and navigate the wilderness. By the time he was a teenager, Lewis had become an exceptional marksman. Life on the frontier was not for the faint of heart. Raids were frequent, and every day carried the threat of violence. But it was an event in 1777, when Lewis was just 13, that would forever change the course of his life. As you hear this, consider what it would be like to grow up knowing danger lurks in every corner. Could you raise a family in such a place? Captured by the enemy. It began on an otherwise quiet morning. Lewis and his younger brother, Jacob, were helping their father near the family's corn crib when 2 Native American warriors emerged from the forest. A musket fired, and Lewis was struck in the chest. Though the ball only grazed his breastbone, the pain was blinding. The boys were quickly captured and dragged deep into enemy territory, while their father watched helplessly from afar. Picture this: 2 young boys, bound and wounded, forced to march through the wilderness. Their captors brought them to a camp near Big Lick, where their fate remained uncertain. Would they be adopted into the tribe, tortured, or killed? For 2 nights they lay awake, terrified of what the morning might bring. For the warriors, these boys were more than captives. They were symbols of a broader conflict over land and survival. Native American communities saw the capture of settlers as both a tactical and symbolic act. Some captives were adopted into tribes to replace lost members, while others were ransomed or used to send a message of resistance. For the Wetzels, this was not a political event, but a deeply personal tragedy. But Lewis was not one to give in. On the second night, he worked tirelessly to free himself from his bonds. Once loose, he untied Jacob. Realizing they couldn't travel far without shoes, Lewis crept back into the camp and stole moccasins and his father's rifle. With hearts pounding, the brothers slipped into the darkness and began their perilous journey home. Imagine the fear of hearing your captors in pursuit, their shouts echoing through the trees. The boys evaded detection by hiding in thick underbrush and using their knowledge of the land to stay ahead. After days of grueling travel, they finally crossed the Ohio River on a makeshift raft and reached the safety of Zane's Island. Their return was celebrated, but the experience left Lewis changed. He swore an oath of vengeance, a vow that would define the rest of his life. If you found yourself in Lewis's situation, how would you respond? The native struggle for survival. For Native Americans, the late 1700s was a time of profound upheaval. Tribes like the Shawnee, Delaware, and Miami faced unprecedented challenges as settlers encroached on their ancestral lands. By the time Lewis Wetzel was born, diseases brought by Europeans had already decimated native populations, and treaties like the 1768 Treaty of Fort Stanwix had stripped them of vast territories. This growing loss of land and resources forced many tribes into conflict to defend their way of life. In the Ohio River Valley, leaders like Blue Jacket of the Shawnee and Little Turtle of the Miami emerged to unite tribes in resistance against settlers and U.S. forces. These leaders understood that their people's survival depended on pushing back the frontier, often through coordinated raids on settlements. These raids were not only acts of war, but also strategies to secure food, resources, and leverage in negotiations. Yet for Native communities, the cost of resistance was immense. Entire villages were destroyed, families were displaced, and sacred lands were desecrated. While settlers like the Wetzels saw Native raids as unprovoked acts of violence, for tribes, these actions were part of a desperate struggle to preserve their homes and cultures. Every raid, every skirmish, deepened the divide between the two worlds, making reconciliation seem impossible. A vow forged in blood. Wetzel's first significant act of vengeance came at the age of 16, when he killed his first native warrior near St. Clairsville, Ohio. By this time, Wetzel had developed a reputation as an exceptional marksman and a master of stealth. His ability to reload his rifle while running, a skill he practiced for years, became legendary. In the chaotic skirmish, Wetzel's speed and accuracy were pivotal, turning the tide in favor of the settlers. Another pivotal moment came during the rescue of Rose Forrest, the wife of a neighboring settler. Rose had been captured by a group of 4 native warriors, who took her deep into the forest. Lewis, accompanied by Rose's husband Frazier, tracked the captors to their camp. Through the night, the 2 men waited, their plans set. Take out the guards at dawn and rescue Rose. At first light, they struck, killing 2 captors instantly. In the chaos, Lewis pursued the remaining 2 warriors, ultimately killing both with precision shots after a tense chase through the woods. Rose was saved, and the story solidified Wetzel's reputation as a protector. A native resistance unites. From 1777 to the early 1780s, Native American tribes in the Ohio River Valley faced growing pressure from settler expansion and military campaigns, leading to coordinated resistance to protect their homes and cultures. During the American Revolutionary War, tribes like the Shawnee, Delaware, and Wyandot found themselves caught between British forces and American settlers. The British supported these tribes with weapons to destabilize American efforts, resulting in raids on frontier settlements. A notable event was the siege of Fort Henry in September 1777, led by Wyandot and Shawnee warriors. This event highlighted the tribe's coordination against settlers, despite the fort's defense. Meanwhile, leaders like Cornstalk of the Shawnee navigated the challenges of diplomacy and war. After previously signing the Treaty of Camp Charlotte, tensions resumed, and he was imprisoned and later assassinated by American militiamen in 1777, escalating hostilities and prompting greater resistance from the Shawnee. The death wind strikes again. It was during these times that death winds struck again. Wetzel encountered a group of native warriors luring settlers into an ambush using turkey calls. Knowing the trick, Wetzel waited near a cave and, with his unerring aim, shot one of the warriors as they revealed themselves. Thanks to Wetzel's quick thinking, the turkey call trap was no longer a threat to settlers in the area. However, Wetzel's actions were not without controversy. His indiscriminate approach to vengeance often blurred the lines between combatants and innocents. For him, any Native American was an enemy, a mindset that perpetuated cycles of violence on the frontier. These cycles left both settlers and native tribes in a constant state of grief and fear. Perhaps his most notorious attack took place on November 6, 1788. Wetzel ambushed and killed Seneca Chief Tegunte during peace negotiations at Fort Harmar. The Americans, represented by Colonel Josiah Harmar, had worked for years to put over this treaty. This treaty was the keystone of the new United States government's Indian policy in the Northwest Territory. Even though most frontiersmen approved of Wetzel's motives, this ambush put him beyond the pale as far as the American government was concerned. Colonel Harmar posted him as wanted for murder, and he became a fugitive. For many settlers, vengeance was a way of life, but Lewis Wetzel took it to another level. His vendetta against Native Americans became an obsession. He honed his skills to near superhuman levels, practicing how to reload his rifle while running. This ability made him a feared and legendary figure on both sides of the Ohio River. Settlers celebrated Wetzel as a hero. His exploits, often recounted around campfires, inspired other young men to take up arms. But this cycle of vengeance only escalated the violence, making peace increasingly elusive. The frontier in context. To understand Wetzel's story, we must also understand the world he lived in. The American Revolution had ended, but the Northwest Territory remained a battleground. Treaties like the Proclamation Line of 1763 and the Treaty of Fort Stanwix were ignored by settlers hungry for land. This fueled resentment among native tribes, who saw their homelands being steadily encroached upon. For Native Americans, the frontier was not a land of opportunity, but a place of despair. Communities were uprooted, traditions were lost, and the very fabric of their existence was threatened. Families lived in fear of sudden raids, and sacred lands were often destroyed or desecrated. Meanwhile, settlers faced their own struggles, including isolation, food shortages, and the constant threat of attack. As you hear this, ask yourself, could there have been another way? Could settlers and native tribes have coexisted, or was conflict inevitable? Lessons from the frontier. What can we learn from Lewis Wetzel's life? His story is a reminder that revenge often perpetuates the very suffering it seeks to avenge. In his relentless pursuit of justice, he became both a symbol of resilience and a product of the violence that defined his world. Wetzel's life challenges us to seek understanding and reconciliation. As we reflect on his story, we are reminded that history is not just a record of the past, but a guide for the future. And that, my friends, is the story of Lewis Wetzel, a man whose life reflected the harsh realities of the frontier. His tale is a mirror of his time, filled with bravery, tragedy, and moral complexity. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, happy hunting.